Good morrow, scholars. Welcome back to the Last Jedi, a video essay by me, Ben Iguana. Sorry, I'm just thinking about how I came up with the name. Anywho, I'm sure you noticed that I changed the posters back here, just real quick. We've got Leia, Rey, and Han, and it's not because I wanted Rey to actually be their daughter in addition to Ben Solo being their son. I was never really for that theory or anything. It just kind of worked out that way. Anywho, sorry, I just got done watching a little bit of television, so I'm kind of tired, It's kind of winding down. I decided I kind of prefer recording at night because the sunlight kind of washes out of the room, makes it kind of hard to keep things the way I like it in terms of, like, I guess not quality of the video, but, something along those lines. Anywho, today I kind of, well, I guess tomorrow for you, but, no, today for you, tomorrow for me. Today, I'd like to talk about the Jedi Academy in the new Star Wars canon that Luke starts, and kind of compare it to the original Jedi Praxium that Luke starts there in the old EU. Or Legends, if you would prefer. And it's really interesting because, on one hand, people actually do like having Luke be this sort of like flawed mentor type, and how that's something really different from what we got before, and that we can let the past die, so to speak. But honestly, it's never really been that way, even in the original canon. It's really weird because, they'll say this about that, but I guess they kind of ignore Luke's, like, flirtations, if you will, with the dark side in the original trilogy. Not to mention the couple of times after in, like, the comics and in a couple of the novels where he gets really close to falling to the dark side. But that's not really what I want to talk about. It's really more of, like, the situation they're in, and how some people say it's fresh and new, much like what I was saying constantly in the previous video, are how people who, like, glamorize the old EU, they kind of forget that it's kind of in the middle. I really love how it's kind of a little bit of both, like, how the movies are kind of going. But, okay, here's the thing. Let's see, I have it written down right here. We've got Luke Skywalker. He's going on his, I forget the word, like, sojourn, his journey throughout the galaxy, trying to gather up all of the lost Jedi artifacts. He even comes across a holocron, I believe, in the new canon that was recorded by Shaw, who, if you guys know anything about Star Wars, she's had like 5 different deaths or something. Each one just keeps getting erased. There's one. Let's not talk about that. I will go off on another tangent. And I really do like those stories. I would have much rather we had gotten something showing Luke's journey, learning all these different Force religions. We got a little bit of it in what's it called? The Legends of Luke Skywalker, when he goes to that one planet and learns of the tide and how it ebbs and flows. It's not good versus evil, light and dark. It's one force that, balances itself out. Kind of like how a pendulum goes, life, death, warm, cold. You remember the scene with Rey. It was actually one of the best parts of that movie. Again, I'm going on a tangent. But there should have been a lot more of that leading up to The Last Jedi, because I feel like they cheated us somehow. they tell us that Luke failed, but they don't really show us, so we're not invested. That's one of the reasons why I think it didn't do too well. You know what I mean? Because uh, in one of the books that I've read on here after reading the original trilogy's novelizations, it was the Jedi Search trilogy. In there, Luke goes. It's been a few years since Return of the Jedi. He goes and he's collecting as many Force-sensitive people as he can because he wants to restart the Jedi Order. So he comes to this planet. He's got 12 students, and Han finds a. I think it was 12 that he had. This one might have made 12, and I'm misremembering. But Han finds another student for him. Somebody that was imprisoned on Kessel that just happened to be Force sensitive. His name was Kip Duron. Some of you might remember him for various things. In Legends, right before Disney did the whole wipe away, he was actually an accomplished Jedi Master. But in that particular story, he's a young kid who's out of his depth, who gets influenced by a dark side entity, and he starts to poison his mind and turn him against Luke and the other students. Ultimately, some of them get struck down. Oh man, I can't remember the one guy's name, but man, oh gosh, he's more like Ben Solo than I thought. I'm gonna have to let you guys know down in the comments. I don't want to go on Google and Google the guy's name, but Kip wasn't the only one influenced by this Darksider. Another one of Luke's students that he saved from Eol SHA, I think was its name. I like that I can remember the planet, although that might have just been the city he was in. Anyway, he was extremely powerful in the Force, but he felt like Luke wasn't allowing him to live up to his potential. So he starts studying on his own, and this dark side entity teaches him how to construct a lightsaber. Once it's complete, if I recall correctly, I want to say it was a silver blade, but it might have been purple. And I know that's a big difference, but bear with me, I have not read that book in about 3 years? 2, at the very least. Anyway. So this Darksider tries to take over that guy's mind who's just created a lightsaber and turn him to the dark side, kill Luke and the other students, and restart the Sith, basically. He declines and tries to fight this dark side entity on his own without anybody else knowing. If I recall correctly, he was in a different part of the temple on Yavin. That's where they set up the Jedi Praxium and the old EU. And he's ultimately destroyed. And I mean that quite literally. There was just a blast mark on the wall that was left of him. So that put a pretty huge damper on things for Luke's first go around as a teacher, because ultimately he confronts this dark side entity after however long. I really should go back and read the rest of that story for you guys. Anyway, Luke ends up in a coma, which happens a bit more often than you would think. And he's trying to teach his students how to reach him so that they can wake up his body, since he's stuck. And the Darksiders controlling Kip's mind, and he's eventually able to switch places with him, almost. And shoot, where was I going with that? Well, I guess the point being for this large tangent, which is also somehow a part of what the topic is at the same time, this duality that I don't understand. Luke's always struggled with doing the right thing and I guess doing the correct thing. If that makes sense to you guys. Like, it's like how they say, like, there's... oh, shoot. How does the saying go about what is right and what is the law? And how it's not always the same thing? But it's really interesting to see that people say, like, The Last Jedi is fresh and new, whereas people will say, like, no, Luke is supposed to be like this in Legends. And then you see that it's a mixture of the two, except for the fact that it's not really fresh and new. To have Luke be like this flawed character who can't quite do what he wants to do, even though he has the best of intentions. Like, I've already gotten that story. I wanted to see something new, or at the very least see something good. And while I will admit, anything that had Mark Hamill in it, except for, he had a little cameo on Canto Bight, I still don't like Canto Bight. Don't worry, I'm not going to go into detail about that, like, that's not really important. I'm kind of, sort of, but that'll be for later. But, like, Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker, any scene that he was in, I really enjoyed. He brought a lot to the table that I thought was missing from the rest of the movie. And you can really feel, like, that despair he felt, especially in that one scene when he sees the temple in ruin and on fire. Why'd I say it like that? It's just, I don't know, it's very strange. Like, I got the story I wanted, but at the same time I didn't. Like a monkey's paw sort of a thing. And it's really difficult to, I guess, kind of have everything coincide with one another. Because on one hand, there's a lot of this in similarities, like I mentioned in the previous video with Jason Solo, not just Kip. Jason's story is much the same. A dark lady of the Sith, Lumia, or Lumaya, or Lumia. Depending on how you read it, it's really up to you, since there's no audio for this, but I always said Lumia. She was one of the Emperor's hands, much like Mara Jade was in Legends. I'm really disappointed that we're not getting an analog here, but at the same time I can kind of understand. I mean, as much as I don't like it, it's something that I can accept, but I don't like that I accept it. Anyway, she, Lumia, is able to, like, worm her way into Jason's mind through logic, I guess you could say. Like, she shows him certain things about the aspects of the Force that he doesn't quite understand, if only because he's... I can't really describe it. Tainted, somehow? If you guys don't know too much about Jason's backstory, he was tortured for an entire year, if I recall correctly. It might have been more than that, or maybe just a little bit. Anyway, he was tortured for an entire year by a species of alien from outside the galaxy in the Star Wars canon, the old EU, called the Yuzon Vong, and that ultimately left him, I guess, more susceptible to the dark side. Like, it left him with, like, a fear of, like, losing everything, not unlike Anakin in regards to losing Padme and their child. And she was able to, like, play with that lingering thought in the back of his mind. And she used it to turn him to the dark side so that he would destroy Luke Skywalker's entire family and everything he built. Does that sound familiar? I understand, and I completely agree with you guys that are saying this. These are all broad strokes, and if you compare, if you were to, like, somehow take everything and, like, overlap them, there are going to be huge gaps where things are not quite lining up. And that's not really the point of these video essay parts. it's really just about, like, the basic plot that the new trilogy is going for is nothing new. We've seen it before, and we feel like those of us that didn't like this movie, but we liked how it was in Legends, it's not so much nostalgia. We like Legends because that's what we grew up with. Even though that is a big part of it, I will grant you that. But that's not really the reason for it. The problem is the story we were told in the new trilogy just is not that great. I'm not saying it's terrible. I'm not saying that you shouldn't like it. I'm not saying if you don't like it, you're smart. If you do, you're dumb. Nothing like that. I really genuinely believe that the story, the directing, just the writing in general, was subpar. And I know a lot of people will disagree, but I'm not saying that one of us is right and the other one's wrong. I'm saying, like, that's what we see. And it's really hard to, like, step back, look at this from each other's point of view, and talk about it. If you know how Star Wars fans are, you know that there's always going to be something. Man. And there's really nothing wrong with either side wanting what they think is an enjoyable experience. I just really feel like if you're gonna do something different, do something different. You can't say... It's one of those things where you change just enough so that you don't get sued. If that makes sense to you. I really hope it does. I can try and explain better in the comments or in the description perhaps, but that's the best way that I can relay my thought on the matter to you guys. And I've never been the best orator in the first place. If you guys have seen me on this channel, you know that for sure. But yeah, that's kind of the point of this video, is that Ben Solo really is a letdown compared to, like, Jason Solo or Kip Duron or even the unnamed, or the heretofore unnamed Jedi learner that gets blown up. Well, I think it's more like atomized than anything else. Kind of picture what happened with the Emperor and Luke. Only instead of, like, the Force lightning, like, torturing him until, like, it burns his body to a crisp, it just instantly incinerated him. Sorry. I'm having thoughts about Thanos and the whole... Never mind. Let's not talk about that. Spoilers. I really feel like this... Okay, with Jason, there was a point where he could have chosen to turn his back on the dark side, rejoin his family, and make amends and rebuild what he destroyed. Because he ends up going to war, it splits the entire Galactic Alliance in half, and they all start fighting each other, and it leaves them extremely weak. And keep in mind, they had just lost roughly 365 trillion lives in the previous war with the Yuuzhan Vong. Although that's just the agreed upon number. Nobody's actually been able to count it, and now that it's Legends, nobody ever will, but that's not the point. He could have chosen to unite the galaxy in such a way that, like, everybody gets a little bit of what they want. It's kind of like how the Star Wars fans are right now. So that they can move forward in a direction that all of them, while they don't like, they can at least begrudgingly go. If that makes sense. But he chooses not to. He chooses the dark side because he thinks it'll give him the power to control the galaxy, but not like the Emperor to destroy lives and play with people's terror like a angry child with a magnifying glass. He wants to control the galaxy so that it doesn't break out into another conflict, and ultimately it's his downfall. With the new trilogy, one of the things that I don't like here versus what happens with Jason is that Ben Solo doesn't really get that choice. Now, you can say that it's Luke's fault. He's the reason, he's the inciting incident that creates Kylo Ren. And while I grant you I don't like that, so, there's that. Objectively, I think that they dropped the ball with the story. I think they could have made it really engaging. The only problem is by doing that and kind of glossing over the fact, because it's mentioned in a couple of the books here and there, that Leia not only knew Snoke, they've met before in some capacity. And I forget which book it was or where, but Snoke's been influencing Ben Solo since he was, if I recall correctly, in the womb. I don't have a womb, I'm just kind of motioning for, video purposes. I don't know. I'm not that normal. But since Ben Solo was young, he's been influencing his mind towards the dark side, and I really feel like that wasn't a great way to go, because it takes the choice out of his hands, so to speak. He doesn't really choose to go to the dark side and betray his uncle to try and kill his family, ultimately succeed in killing his father, and going to war with the rest of the galaxy. It's not until, the end of the movie, we've all seen it by now, so no need for spoilers. It's not until the end of the movie, well, I guess towards the middle, when he kills Snoke, but even then, but that's after everything is said and done, and I feel like that choice came too late, because he was already on that path against his will. I understand that, nobody was forcing him to walk down that path, but ultimately Snoke was. And while I do agree that Luke's kind of the match and everything, he did not strike it. He didn't strike the flame so much as he kind of was the flame. And I think that's why I don't really feel any sort of engagement on my part in regards to the movie, is because Snoke is the one that did all of it. He's been influencing Ben Solo to turn into Kylo Ren since he was very young, and that ultimately is what causes Luke to react the way he does. Now, it could be said that had he been stronger, emotionally or what have you, then it wouldn't have happened, so that makes it his fault. However, like I said in the previous video, if Luke Skywalker says or thinks that the evil you unleash is so terrible that I need to cut you down now to prevent it, there must be a reason for it. I can tell you without a doubt, if I were, I'm Ben, but, I'm this Ben, and I'd rather not be. If I were that Ben, I would I understand. I've been in here. I know what's going on. This is what we need to do. And I would absolutely not be okay with it. But he would have my blessing. And you guys might disagree on all of those points. You might think the opposite. No, I understand, absolutely. I'm a huge Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker fanboy. I have been since I was a baby. I will be until the day after I die. I don't know what I meant by that. But even still, the whole storyline with Anakin, why I understand people don't really like the prequels. I'm really upset that they haven't actually tied in all three trilogies together yet. I'm really hoping for 9 to pick up that kind of dropped idea, because as far as I'm concerned, The Last Jedi, even though I don't like it that much, I don't think it's the worst movie ever made or anything like that. But I think it had an obligation to do something with the story, and it chose to chuck it over its shoulder and go in a different direction. But there was no setup. Much like with Ben Solo's whole turn to the dark side. If he's been influenced since he was a baby to go to the dark side, but they don't really show us anything, coming of that up until Luke has the moment's hesitation to cut him down in his sleep, then there's a lot of tell and no show. And I feel like with Anakin, we got kind of the opposite. Which is kind of weird, because I know a lot of people don't like the prequels because they don't really show us a lot. I guess because it's me, I can see a lot more in regards to reading more of the books. But I really feel like with Anakin, every single step he took to becoming Vader was chosen, but each step was taken not to become Vader. It was to become stronger than he was, so that he could stop these things from happening, things that he doesn't have control over, kind of like with Jason Solo. But that sort of doomed by canon feel, I think, is really what did it in for movie Anakin, because we know how he turns up, and he's not cool anymore. But I really enjoyed seeing like his journey to becoming Darth Vader, and I really feel like with Ben Solo becoming Kylo Ren off screen, and they just tell us all this stuff, that they really dropped the ball. And I understand, like, well, people complained over here about this, and then the new trilogy did something slightly different over here. Some would say, I guess, like the inverse or the reverse. And we're just complaining about it now. And I grant you, there's a lot of that going on. I personally disagree. I don't think that the problems that each one has really equals the other. Not in terms of, like, how much or more, but, or I guess how little, how more, but it's more like the errors each one made is not the same that the other one made, and that they should not be compared. Kind of like the whole apples to oranges. They're two very distinct fruits that each has, their plus and their minuses and what have you. But you can't really compare the two of them on the same level. And I think that's where a lot of this comes from. Each one of us is like somewhere different, saying like, oh, that's not any good over here or over there, and then there's just no like meeting in the middle. Which again is the point of the movie. And if it weren't for the fact that the movie doesn't actually show us that, except for in that one little scene, well, I guess it's not really that little, but in that one scene, which is really cool, and I think describes how everything is supposed to be for the Force and the Jedi and what have you, the rest of the movie kind of ignores that. And I could go on, but let's not, because this whole thing was supposed to be, like Luke's journey to become the Master of the Order, however brief it was in the sequel trilogy, versus, his start in the old EU. And they're very much the same. The only real difference is that it wasn't completely crushed in the old EU, and in the new canon, it just gets burned away. Again, I don't like it. but I think it's because we just never got that story. They just told us. Like, if the first movie had been about Luke and him trying to train these new Jedi, and then everything happened, and then that sets up, like, Rey and Finn and Poe and all them in the second movie, and then we get a third one to, like, top everything off, and then, you know, open our minds to the larger galaxy and what it means to be a Jedi. I think that would have been a much better use of their time. Let me know what you guys think. I think that's about all I can say on the subject. Even though it really isn't, I could go on and on and on and on and on. But it's already over 30 minutes, and I kind of meant for this to be about 22 or so. So if you have any thoughts, rebuttals, or suggestions about stuff that I should talk about, or maybe some stuff that you feel like I shouldn't have gone over, because let's face it, I did mention a lot more than I meant to. And if I talk too fast, it's because I'm still getting used to getting back in front of the camera. So I apologize, and I'll try to do better in the next video. And I think we've got about, or I've got about 4 more videos that I can make with the content that I spent. I think I was writing for about 2 hours. I wasn't spending the whole time writing. I was also doing research on the new canon, the old canon, and everything in between, because, you know, there's a little bit of a gray area. But anyway, let me know your guys' thoughts. I really hope that I get my point across without sounding like I somehow know more than you, even though, let's face it, the shirt was not the best to wear. And admittedly, even though all of my friends that I hang out with weekly on game night think, well, half of them think they know more than I do about Star Wars, they're nowhere close. Nowhere close. Like, they would be those younglings that Anakin killed, and then I would be like the father from the Mortis arc in Star Wars: The Clone Wars, which is a great show. If you guys don't like movie Anakin from the prequels, definitely go watch The Clone Wars, because you get a much more in-depth and personal story there. Anyway, I've rambled too much. I'm sorry. To the one commenter, I haven't had a chance to reply back. I will after I finish recording this video. Thanks for your thoughts. I'm glad you liked it, and I'm glad that we could, you know, acknowledge some flaws here and there. That really does mean a lot to me, especially considering one of my friends is like the biggest annoyance when it comes to arguing, because all he does is talk louder over you, and then when you give up talking to him, he thinks he's won the argument, because, you know, whatever. Anyway, until next time, may the Force be with you.